Hello and welcome. I'm Geeta Mohan and you're watching India Today Global. The top story we're tracking at this hour. US seized a Russian-flagged oil tanker that was being shadowed by a Russian submarine after pursuing it for more than 2 weeks across the Atlantic as part of Washington's efforts to block Venezuelan oil exports. US officials said this in a briefing to certain media persons. This appeared to be the first time that the US military has seized a Russian-flagged vessel. Reacting to the seizure, a Russian lawmaker said US seizure of the oil tanker is outright breach of privacy. The Marinera, originally known as the Bella One, had previously slipped through a U.S. maritime blockade of sanctioned tankers in the Caribbean and rebuffed U.S. Coast Guard efforts to board it. In a post on X, the U.S. military's European command said the Trump administration had seized the vessel for violating U.S. sanctions. According to Russian Ministry of Transportation, on December 24, 2025, the vessel Marinera was granted temporary permission to sail under the Russian flag, and later U.S. naval forces boarded the vessel and communication with the ship was subsequently lost. Russia invoked the 1982 UN Convention on the Law of the Seas and said no state has the right to use force against vessels duly registered under the jurisdiction of other states. In another development, Department of War in the United States of America, in a post on X, said that in coordination with the Department of Homeland Security, it has apprehended a stateless, sanctioned dark fleet motor tanker without incident. The interdicted vessel, MT Sophia, was operating in international waters and conducting illicit activities in the Caribbean Sea. The U.S. Coast Guard is escorting MT Sophia to the U.S. for final disposition. U.S. Secretary of State in another tweet has said, and I quote, "The blockade of sanctioned and illicit Venezuelan oil remains in full effect anywhere in the world." And breaking news coming in after seizing the two Venezuelan-linked oil tankers, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has said Venezuela wants oil from one of the seized tankers to be part of the deal. Rubio also said, "We will control how money from sale of Venezuelan oil will be dispersed in a way that benefits the Venezuelan people." And U.S. Defense Secretary Hexeth said leverage from oil blockade continues. This is happening as we speak in a joint press conference by the Defense Secretary and the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio and Pete Hexeth. Listen in.
As you've seen today, 2 more ships were seized. We are in the midst right now and, in fact, about to execute on a deal to take all the oil. They have oil that is stuck in Venezuela. They can't move it because of our quarantine and because it's sanctioned. We are going to take between 30 and 50 million barrels of oil. We're going to sell it in the marketplace at market rates, not at the discounts Venezuela was getting. That money will then be handled in such a way that we will control how it is dispersed in a way that benefits the Venezuelan people, not corruption, not the regime. So we have a lot of leverage to move on the stabilization front.
And my colleague Rohit Sharma joins me from Washington, D.C. for more on this. Big news coming in, big developments, Rohit, not one but 2 vessels. But certainly the one with the Russian flag is going to be a huge problem for Russia for sure. But they've already invoked UN Charter. So for the United States of America as well?
They have, and the fact is, I think this is where I think we're talking about. This is a very uncharted territory. We do not know how this is going to be. We saw a tweet, a post from President Trump yesterday when he said U.S. would be selling oil, taking oil from Venezuela and selling it. Today, Marco Rubio doubling down on that, and I think it's going to be a diplomatic rift between the U.S. and Russia. Russia clearly upset, not happy. They want the tanker to be returned to the Russians. So we do not know how this is going to be. The U.S. is making the case that, look, these were docked in Venezuela. They were, going into or out of Venezuela. And because of the sanctions, U.S. can go ahead and take these tankers. So this is very, very different 2026 than we anticipated. Like the last week of December, we we're talking about possibly a deal between Russia and Ukraine. But this is probably going to throw a wrench between how the U.S. and Russia talk and then what consequences it will have for the wider world.
Well, absolutely, because this is going to have huge ramifications. Now, we have to wait and see not just how Russia reacts to this, Rohit, but also how China reacts to it. I'm sure NATO countries, particularly Europe on Greenland, are in a huddle. So will Russia and China be. And in that case, America will have to recalibrate how they're going to act against Venezuela when it comes to Russia and China.
Absolutely. You mentioned about Greenland. That's something. I mean, again, President Trump talking about it this morning and saying he's not sure if NATO will even come to defend America against China and Russia. And I think kind of indicating that the U.S. wants to go alone, solo, and deciding on what's best for the U.S. is America First policy, which we all know. So I think it is again, he's turned it upside down in 2026. First, going and capturing Maduro, and now this. So he's escalating things not only with adversaries, but also when talking about Greenland with people in NATO. So this is, again, very different than what people thought about. People were anticipating that there could be an end to the Russia-Ukraine war, something that President Trump wants. But I think by these actions, he's thrown another, set of variables into how things will turn out in the next few months. And remember, you talked about China, Geeta. President Trump is slated to go to China, not, probably in like 8 or 9 weeks from now. So we'll have to wait and watch what unfolds between now and April.
Well, that's right, Rohit. When it comes to the discussions, the briefing that is taking place between or by Pete Hegseth and Marco Rubio are spelling out some few very important details. But walk us through what happens next when it comes to these vessels. They have been apprehended. It is a Russian flag we're talking about, and the naval blockade continues. But he's made a very significant statement, Marco Rubio. He says that this fight is going to go to anywhere in the world where Venezuelan oil is reaching. That's significant.
And we all know, right? I mean, so the allegation essentially is that Venezuela was shipping this oil to Russia and Iran, and we're seeing what's going on in Iran as well, right? We've seen what statements have Iranians made about the U.S. A preemptive strike is what we've heard that they are willing to do if the U.S. does what it wants to do. And President Trump saying he will act decisively in Iran. So I think that it's a larger case of how they're looking at things. Obviously, these three countries are on target, which means China, Russia, and Iran. But the fact that Secretary Rubio said that we will be making a deal for the Venezuelan people, we'll be selling this oil at market price. So there is that business aspect to it, which President Trump talked about 2 days ago. Well, again, this is something we haven't seen U.S. act like. We've seen rogue states act like this. But I think President Trump clearly has something on his mind. He wants to make sure Western Hemisphere is secure. Venezuelan oil is sold at market price and at not low price, and the U.S. is willing to do whatever it can to ensure that it is able to achieve those goals.
Right. Rohit, thank you so much for joining us. But let's also listen into what Pete Hegseth had to say on the Venezuela situation.
2 oil tankers, 2 overnight, were seized by the United States of America, stateless or sanctioned, because the oil blockade, the quarantine of oil out of unsanctioned or sanctioned or stateless vessels continues. That leverage will continue as Secretary Rubio outlined. So our military is prepared to continue this. As he said, the president, when he speaks, he means it.
And another breaking news coming in on the same story. U.S. and Denmark now are to discuss Greenland next week. That's the news that's just coming in. U.S. Secretary, in that very same briefing, has said that he will meet with the Denmark government to discuss Greenland next week. Listen in.
I'm not here to talk about Denmark or military intervention. I'll be meeting with them next week. We'll have those conversations with them then. But I'm not having anything further to add to that
today.
Can
you clarify your comments to lawmakers? Does the U.S. intend to buy Greenland? Does the U.S. intend to buy Greenland? Can you clarify your comments to lawmakers this week?
Well, that's always been the president's intent from the very beginning. He said it very early on. I mean, this is not new. He talked about it in his first term, and he's not the first U.S. president that has examined or looked at how could we acquire Greenland. There's an interest there. But so I just reminded them of the fact that not only did Truman want to do it, but President Trump's been talking about this since his first term.
Former U.S. President Donald Trump's renewed push to acquire Greenland has sparked alarm across Europe, with Denmark and other NATO allies warning that any threat to a member state undermines the alliance itself. While Trump frames Greenland as vital to U.S. national security, European leaders and citizens reject the idea, reaffirming Greenland's sovereignty and raising concerns over NATO's future amid growing Arctic and geopolitical tensions. Mahashweta Lala with this report.
We need Greenland for national security, not for minerals.
US President Donald Trump's fixation for Greenland has stirred controversy and tension not only among Danish and Greenlanders, but has raised concern over the existence of NATO. Trump's renewed interest in Greenland following the dethroning and capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has forced the nation in the Arctic region to think seriously about the US president's need. Trump and his administration are now mulling options, if needed, even militarily, to annex Greenland.
We need Greenland for national security, not for minerals. We have so many sites for minerals and oil and everything. We have more oil than any other country in the world. We need Greenland for national security. And if you take a look at Greenland, you look up and down the coast, you have Russian and Chinese ships all over the place. We need it for national security. We have to have it.
Prime Minister of Denmark, Mette Frederiksen, said both Denmark and Greenland are NATO members, and if US attacks a member nation, then the principles of the alliance and the security of its members will be at stake.
Firstly, I believe that the American president should be taken seriously when he says that he wants Greenland. But I also want to make it clear that if the United States chooses to attack another NATO country militarily, then everything stops. That is, including our NATO and thus the security that has been provided since the end of the Second World War.
My thought about Trump just wanting to take over Greenland is absurd. And I think he's the archetype of greed, and we need to push back and let him know that this is not for him. And yeah, it's just madness.
In the face of threat against a European nation and a NATO ally, 7 European countries have reaffirmed in a joint statement that Greenland belongs to its people, stressing that issues concerning Denmark and Greenland must be decided solely by Denmark and Greenland.
Żaden członek Paktu Północnoatlantyckiego nie powinien.
No member of NATO should attack or threaten another member of NATO. Otherwise, it would lose its meaning if conflict or aggressive actions occurred within the alliance.
Gdyby w obrębie tego paktu dochodziło do konfliktu czy wzajemnych agresywnych kroków.
And as far as Greenland is concerned, I can only say that Greenland, like the Faroe Islands, is part of the Danish kingdom. And since Denmark is a member of NATO, Greenland will in principle have to be defended by NATO. And if there are further requirements to strengthen defense efforts with regard to Greenland, then we will have to discuss this together within the framework of the alliance.
Bezüglich Grönlands zu verstärken, dann werden wir das im Rahmen der Allianz miteinander zu besprechen haben.
The US attack on Venezuela and the subsequent capture of the head of the state did not have any congressional approval. While Republicans feigned ignorance about Trump's next ambition, Democrats say the president's aim to include Greenland as a part of US will go against the basic principle on which NATO was founded.
Well, I'm going to go by what the president says, and it didn't come up in his meeting with us today, and he and I haven't had a discussion about it, so I don't know. I think Greenland is viewed by a lot of people as something that would be a strategic positioning for the U.S. I don't know how it develops from there.
Really, does anyone really think that NATO would still exist if America violated the territorial integrity of a NATO ally? That's totally counter to the whole concept of NATO. I think it's very dangerous kind of language. And, you know, I know the president doesn't like the leadership of Colombia or Mexico, but both of those leaders were elected by their own population. So I think, again, there's got to be some red lines here someplace.
Greenland, located in the Arctic, is more to home than 56,000 people. It's an autonomous territory of Denmark and is strategically located between US, Europe and Russia. Rich in natural resources like gas and oil, rare earth metals, it will give United States an upper hand over China, which presently is the world's largest producer and processor of rare earth minerals, controlling over 69% of global production and 90% of refining capacity. With changes in climate and the melting of Arctic ice, accessibility to the northern shipping routes throughout the year will become more important. With Mahashweta Lala, Bureau Report, India Today.
What if the unthinkable happens and the United States targets Greenland, a NATO-linked Arctic territory? Such a move would turn ally against alliance, rewrite global security assumptions, and force Europe to confront NATO without America. Would the single strike end the alliance as we know it? Jyoti Shukla with the report.
What if the unthinkable happens? What if the United States attacks Greenland? Greenland is not just an Arctic island. It's a semi-autonomous territory of Denmark. And Denmark is a NATO member, which means one thing. If the US attacks Greenland, it would technically be an attack on NATO itself. European leaders have already sounded the alarm. In a rare joint statement, France, Germany, the UK, Italy, Spain, Poland and Denmark made it clear that Greenland is part of NATO, that borders are inviolable, and that Arctic security must be defended collectively. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen went even further, warning that if the United States attacks another NATO country, everything stops. Because NATO without the United States would not just be weakened, it would be transformed. So what would NATO actually look like if the US were on the other side? Start with air power. The US Air Force alone fields more than 1,400 combat-capable aircraft. Bombers, stealth fighters, electronic warfare planes, helicopters, all backed by unmatched logistics. Without the US, NATO's biggest air forces belong to France, the UK, and Turkey, each operating roughly 200 to 300 aircraft. Capable, modern, but nowhere near American sail or reach. Next, land forces. The US Army has close to 500,000 troops, more than 2,600 Abrams tanks, and tens of thousands of armored vehicles. Compare that to Europe. Britain and France each operate just over 200 main battle tanks. Canada has fewer than 100. Poland is the standout, with more than 660 tanks and rapidly expanding forces. But even that cannot replace American mass. Then there's the sea. The US Navy is the backbone of NATO's global presence. 11 aircraft carriers, dozens of destroyers and cruisers, 65 submarines, most of them nuclear-powered. Without the US, NATO's only carrier would be Britain's too. European navies are professional and capable, but none can project power across oceans the way US can. And finally, nuclear weapons. This is the biggest gap of all. The United States and Russia together hold about 90% of the world's nuclear weapons. Inside NATO, only the US, the UK and France have nuclear arms. Remove the US and NATO is left with British and French deterrence alone. Credible, yes, but far smaller. So what does this mean? A NATO without the United States would still be strong, still advanced, still united. But it would be regional, not global. And that is why Greenland matters. Because an attack would not just test NATO's unity. It could end the alliance as we know it. With Jyoti Shukla, Bureau Report, India Today Global.
A day after Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro was produced before a New York court on charges of narco-terrorism, cocaine importation conspiracy, possession of machine guns and destructive devices, U.S. President Donald Trump in a post on Truth Social said, and I quote, Venezuela will be turning over between 30 and 50 million barrels of high-quality sanctioned oil to the United States of America. This oil will be sold at its market price, and that money will be controlled by me as President of the United States of America to ensure it is used to benefit the people of Venezuela and the United States. Following Trump's remarks that the United States will run Venezuela, acting President Delcy Rodriguez reaffirmed the country's sovereignty while denying external forces control. She emphasized that Venezuela remains independent and is governed by its constitutional government. Meanwhile, China has strongly condemned United States of America redirecting Venezuelan oil exports to Washington and away from Beijing after President Trump unveiled a plan to refine and sell those barrels of Venezuelan oil. According to a report by the New York Times, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has asked Venezuelan interim government led by Delcy Rodriguez to expel official advisors from China, Russia, Cuba, and Iran. According to another report by ABC News, Venezuela will not be allowed to pump more oil if it does not kick out and sever economic ties with these countries. According to NYT, apart from some diplomats, spies and military personnel from Cuba, Russia, and Iran would also be forced out. Now, at least 36 people have been killed in the ongoing economic crisis protests in Iran. After U.S. captured Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, Trump's get hit very hard by the United States warning to Iran in case peaceful protesters were killed has not gone down well with Tehran. Iran's top judge, Ghulam Mohseni Ejei, said there is no excuse for those who come into the streets to take part in riots or lead them or support them or assist them. Demonstrations spread in Tehran and other cities since the 28th of December over a plunge in the Iranian currency's value that has really accelerated inflation. A social media footage showed large crowd in the streets of Abdanan in Iran's southwestern Elam province. The exiled son of Iran's toppled Shah, Reza Pahlavi, urged Iran's armed and security forces to side with the people and call for more protests amid unrest. Meanwhile, amid threats to Iran by Trump, multiple streets in the country have been informally renamed President Trump Street. Though not acknowledged by Iranian authorities, but images and videos circulating online show graffiti and placards bearing the name. Amid rumors of marital problems of U.S. Vice President JD Vance and Usha Vance, the VP took to social media and posted a birthday message for his wife, Usha Vance. The White House's official X account also shared the post. Speculations have been of some problems in their marriage since Vance became a national political figure. The Vances were married in 2014 after meeting at Yale Law School. It also comes amid divorce speculation that gained traction in late 2025 when Usha was photographed with her wedding ring at several public events. The rumors were also fueled by Vance's hug with Erica Kirk at a Turning Point USA event last month. That's all in this bulletin for now. Thank you for watching. Goodbye and take care.